What a week it has been yet again. We've got plenty of Ship 38 action as we head rapidly towards Flight Test 11. Yeah, it really is right around the corner. Not only that, so much stuff to update you on with all the new site development and testing. Yeah, they've already done this. If you had looked at the launch schedule for the week, you may have thought for a second that it may have ended up a little quiet, but of course, no. On top of the expected action, we've got so much new stuff to explore here. Sit back and relax, this one is packed.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Hey, Marcus House with you here, and it has been another exciting week down at the Gateway to Mars with SpaceX making some good progress towards Starship Flight 11. We left you last week with Booster 15 being placed back into Mega Bay 1 after performing a successful static fire of all of its 33 engines the day prior. Remember, Booster 15 has already been flown before, with it being caught back at the launch tower on Flight 8, so this will be the second time that SpaceX has ever attempted to refly a used super heavy booster. The upper stage Starship 38, however, still needed to do its static fire. With Massey's being upgraded for all of the next generation vehicles, we just needed to wait for SpaceX to be done reinstalling the makeshift stand and quick disconnect system so that they could do the static fire on Pad 1 instead. Well, on Tuesday, the arms at Pad 1 had been moved to the normal pre-lifting position in preparation for the rollout. Sure enough, overnight, right after the road delay was scheduled, the door of Mega Bay 2 opened just enough for us to see Ship 38 lifted down onto its transport stand. The lifts rose with workers ready to help remove the gigantic slings attached under the lift points on the ship, and after unhooking those, we were ready to roll. Shaun with us here was on site to cover the rollout of the very last Block 2 ship for its static fire. It is awesome to see that the heat shield has almost fully been completed with only a few tiles missing. Those empty spots are most likely for some experiments that they still want to do. Of course, this has the crunch wrap too, filling up the gaps between the tiles. Before we knew it, here it was arriving at the launch site, going straight between the arms. Once daytime had arrived, the quick disconnect plate was manually hooked up to the ship, and not long after, there it rose. Still amazing to see the ship be lifted onto the mount without a booster already there. This may well be the last time that we ever see this because, of course, it should happen at Massey's for the following Starships again. It was now time to integrate all of the lines from the temporary framework to the ship, along with the engine chill lines installed on the deck of the launch mount. On Thursday, it was go time for the first round of testing. The weather had thankfully cleared, and right at 4:20 PM they were loading liquid oxygen onto the ship. A few minutes later, the engine chill lines also frosted up, telling us that they were chilling down the Raptor engines, and, well, that was it. They must have hit some sort of snag and aborted. Without much cryogenic liquid loaded into the ship, the launch mount vent kicked back in, indicating a detank. Now, as it turns out, the crew was soon back at the pad removing the ship quick disconnect plate, presumably to make some tweaks or repairs to it, and then promptly reattached it to try again on Friday. Starting early that morning, they kicked it back into action to give it another go, but with more issues it seems to have been delayed another day or two at this point, so hopefully they'll have it sorted soon. Now, even with all the attention over at Pad 1 with Ship 38, work on the new Pad 2 had kept screaming along. First, we saw the liquid oxygen quick disconnect extend here. Not just once either, but multiple times, one after the other. So yeah, it's nice to see this working so smoothly already. This open area with the moving parts will obviously later be covered up and shielded like the rest of the bunker, but this gives us a chance to really understand how it all moves. The next day, we saw quite an exciting first test for this new mount. Yes, it was time for some flame deflector testing. From this angle, it might look slightly underwhelming, but what we can't see here is the pretty deep trench that sits under it. Now, interestingly, RGV Aerial Photography did a flyover not long after, and that showed us that the flame trench was still quite flooded. In the past, we have seen what appears to be sump pumps that will help empty the trench when needed, but we're not sure if they have been testing these at this stage or if they have not yet been fully plumbed in, so we'll be watching this closely. Now, as Ship 38 prepared for its static fire with the pad fully closed, SpaceX used that opportunity to test the flame deflector yet again, but this time with much greater intensity. It appears that this was a higher pressure test of the two flame bucket halves, and not long after, the deluge roared to life again, this time looking like it was the ridge at the top. Along with that, check out the huge water jet shooting up at the apex vent of the weir pipes. That certainly looks like it shot up much higher than the vents that we've seen at Pad 1. Just as a reminder, the weir pipes are these diagonal ones that ensure that the water will remain in the tanks even if the valves are open. This week we also saw another of the big water deluge tanks being moved into place at the Pad 2 water farm. More capacity here not only lets them fire the system off using all the water that we would expect to see in a real static fire or launch, but it will also allow them to push more volume through with the same duration. It may even give them flexibility for multiple launch attempts. At Pad 1 currently, if the deflector is fired off but the launch itself is scrubbed, they need to wait to refill the tanks before they can try again. Given the new system at Pad 2 is potentially already hooked up to the water lines that run to the launch site, they can be filling these at all times needed rather than being required to truck in all the water like we've seen them do up to this point at Pad 1. Now we have a bunch to cover here at the production site too. Some sweet views of the B18.3 test tank that was out and about this week. I've had a bunch of questions in the comments over the past few weeks from you asking how SpaceX is going to protect the sensitive components on top of this hot stage system, just like they need to protect the stuff underneath the current hot staging ring on the Block 2 boosters. Well, put quite simply, we don't expect them to have any of this stuff on the top of the booster at all anymore. Remember, the 3 grid fins and all of the mechanical systems that drive them are now further down inside the methane tank. Based on a few angles that we've seen recently, it appears that we have quite substantial housings constructed inside these tanks, so none of this is just swimming around in liquid methane. Thanks to Chameleon Circuit working with us to explain this, it should look very close to this sort of thing. The grid fins and associated mechanisms would be packed right inside here, and the huge batteries needed to drive them would likely be down in the protected chines. The electrical lines would run up some exterior channels to drive them, but yeah, we don't have a clear idea on this yet because we haven't yet seen a full Block 3 booster rolling out. Anyway, long story short, instead of all this complex mess of sensitive components shown clearly in this static fire shot from last week with the hot stage ring on top excluded, for Block 3, none of this will even exist here. It's just an integrated, strong, smooth dome that will take that hot stage punishment without a problem. You could actually compare this to the simplicity of the aft end of the booster where everything is either deleted, moved under the covers of the chines, or in the case of the Raptor startup lines, it appears that they might go through a pipe inside the liquid oxygen tank. I can't wait to see the full booster screaming down to the tower now, including the integrated hot staging gear attached. As always, it's awesome to have Shaun out here picking up all of these great shots of things like the test tank on the Can Crusher. Again, that is all thanks to you being subscribed and watching along here. Man, do we appreciate you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Although we can't reply to everything, we certainly read over it all, and a lot of the stuff that we talk about here is prompted by you awesome space fans. Now, it is also worth pointing out the smaller diameter section here, which also made an appearance on this stand. Yeah, this thing is bizarre. We're not really certain at all what this might be, but it seems to be related to the super heavy booster because soon enough, it was moved into Mega Bay 1. Now, there is a good chance that this was meant for the first Block 3 booster 18, as not long after that tank was moved over into the doorway. We suspect that this new section is then integrated onto the main tank wall off to the side next to the central transfer tube and header tank. This integration must have gone smoothly because only 2 days later here was the section that we have all been waiting to see for a long time. Yes, that right there is Booster 18's aft section. If you remember, SpaceX shared a render here not long ago, and this seems to resemble that quite closely. We can see at least 2 of the chines on the left here and what appears to be one of the 2 quick disconnects at the right. These circular pipes are for the Raptor engine startup gases, engine chill collection, and also other things like the electrical systems for the Raptors. It all really looks like a work of art, right? Hopefully it won't be long before we get to see a more complete Block 3 booster rolling out again, but for now, this has moved inside Mega Bay 1 to be integrated with the liquid oxygen tank. Now heading over to Massey's this week, we can see SpaceX has been hard at work motoring along. More on that shortly, but first a huge thanks to Delete Me sponsoring this video. These days there is a gigantic industry all focused around gathering and selling your data. They are data brokers and are essentially organisations that make money by snapping up your personal information, analysing it and then licensing it out to be used by other companies. All of course with no permission from you. That is why protecting your data has never been more crucial. You'd be shocked how hot a commodity it is in the digital world. Obviously, the more your data is shared around, the more it tends to jeopardise your security and privacy, not just causing annoying targeted advertising, but scams and fraud as well. That's where Delete Me's service is super useful. For months, I've had them scan data brokers for my information. They then request removals in the first month, but they don't stop there. Frequently, they rescan and go through that process again, so they are constantly eliminating data that may resurface as well. Recently, Delete Me introduced this new neat feature. It lets you include your entire family within a single Delete Me account. That means that they can now benefit from the same privacy protection that you've set up yourself. As the account holder, you can easily adjust the privacy controls for each family member. If they want to control any of that themselves, you can even give them their own personal login if they want. Since using it myself, I've certainly had a lot less frustrating calls and spam to deal with, so give it a try using my link at joindeleteme.com/Marcus for a 20% discount on US consumer plans. You can also check out the URL for the international plans in the description. Privacy is a choice, not just for yourself, but your whole family too. Thank you, Delete Me. Okay, so at Massey's this week there has been loads of action, kicking off again with the test article that has been sitting in this big test rig for quite some time. It was put through 2 more cryogenic tests. A few days later though, it was off again with another 2 long duration tests. Now in the last one, something seems to have popped as suddenly it started venting aggressively from the side. Perhaps they have simply been trying to find the breaking point intentionally here, but what we know for sure is that they've done at least 10 cryogenic tests, so they've certainly been pushing it hard. Now interestingly, with a bunch of the formwork being removed this week, it appears as if there has been an incident with the new concrete bunker close to the entrance during the pouring. The back wall looks to be incomplete with an uneven pour, and we even see rebar sticking out. Over here, there are quite a few noticeable cold joints where you can see that parts of the wall cured before the next pour on top. You can also see work being done to remove some of the concrete here too, so yeah, not sure why that happened. Regardless, I'm sure SpaceX will assess and fix it in no time. In better news, the new ground surface equipment bunker beside the ship's static fire stand is beginning to get kitted out with all of its cryogenic, gas and electrical lines, as well as the new sets of valves on either side. We don't yet know which side will be for the oxygen and which for the methane, but SpaceX likes having redundancy in as many of their systems as possible. We often see valves for the liquid and gas lines around various sites split into pairs. This is so if one goes offline, they aren't stuck in a situation that could cause an overpressure event or inability to drain the cryogenic commodities from the vehicle. Now SpaceX is not messing around protecting this site. They've been doing this big pour for the foundation needed for the new blast wall. This means the methane tank farm behind it is going to be well protected if such an energetic event ever happens to the test site again. Now close to the ship's static fire stand, if you have been following the images over time, you will have noticed the 2 large grey steel truss sections here. Well, one of these has begun to have the metal grating installed. Where will these go though? Well, on Wednesday, Lab Padre's Rocket Ranch camera was able to spot the second of the 2 new steel legs being lifted into place beside the ship static fire stand. These were the ones seen here previously sitting in the Sanchez area, and the 2 truss sections with grating are likely work access platforms to be lifted into place here between the 2 legs. Now before we leave Massey's, this may be our last shout out to the old Booster 13 aft section, which has been getting scrapped here since July. You can now see just a fraction of the thrust puck remains, so it may be missing entirely on the next RGV flyover. Now, we also have some interesting news around the Cape site this week. Recently, we had all spotted this pretty random phrase, and the immediate thought was that this could be the name for a new drone ship. We know that previous drone ships were all named from the Culture series by Ian M. Banks, and in Book 4, The State of the Art, there is a ship named You'll Thank Me Later. Sure enough, it was confirmed this week that we were indeed expecting a new vessel to join SpaceX's fleet. Not for Falcon 9 this time though. No, this will in fact be used for transporting vehicles from Starbase to Cape Canaveral. Yeah, finally we get to see information on this plan that we have known was coming for years now. Previously, you may recall the post on SpaceX's website back in March stating that they plan to transport completed Super Heavy boosters and Starship upper stages from Starbase via barge to build up the Starship fleet in Florida. This of course will provide the initial vehicles for the Starship pad at Launch Complex 39A so that they can use those before they are built here. Now, these vehicles will be transported horizontally on the barges to prevent them from tipping over in rough seas. Lewis Nags threw this together as a rough example, so yeah, give him a follow there. I imagine this will have an enclosed top to protect the Starship from the weather, of course, but that would defeat the purpose of these great models here. Now, contrary to, for whatever reason, popular belief that the vehicles won't be able to support themselves laying down, that is absolutely not the case. I see this comment all the time, and I think a lot of people out there believe this simply because we have never seen them laid down before. I mean, Starship enters belly first pulling more than 2G for a start. Likewise, the Super Heavy rips into the atmosphere at a pretty high angle of attack at 4,200 km per hour, decelerating at a ridiculous rate. So yeah, they can absolutely handle laying on a barge, and of course will be pressurised for transport just as they are done in their normal vertical positions. Now, just to tie this argument off, they need to have them laid down anyway, simply due to the many fixed bridges along the intra-coastal waterway. As if that wasn't enough, SpaceX's VP of Launch said right here just a few days ago that SpaceX is planning to break over both the booster and the ship to the horizontal position for transit. Now, of course, we have also had our eyes on the vessel Marmac 308 for quite some time, thinking this may end up being the SpaceX barge that we're talking about. Well, given this was launched here just 2 weeks ago, that is some coincidence, and it appears to be big enough to handle horizontal Starship stages. This is still quite speculative at this stage, but we'll keep an eye on it. Now, while talking about the Starship pad at 39A, this week 3 of the 4 orbital launch mount legs were delivered and lifted into place. This, by our estimates, puts the launch mount work about 5 months away from what we see at Pad 2 in Texas. Yes, you may recall those legs being installed back in April of this year. Interestingly, the water-cooled flame trench buckets are still yet to be installed at the Cape, which had been installed before the legs at Pad 2, so there is a difference in how things are coming together regardless. In order to support this launch mount and its ever-growing tank farm, there were also 2 more large cryogenic storage tanks delivered to Port Canaveral this week, where they were soon unloaded. Sadly, we don't have quite the same resolution here that we do in Starbase, Texas, but from what we can see, there is a lot of attention being thrown into the site right now. It is certainly worth a mention that the SpaceX crew are not the only ones working on the flame buckets. Stoke Space just shared fresh photos of their new flame diverter system installed at Space Launch Complex 14. They will soon be running the water suppression system test sequences to make sure it is doing what is needed. Although flame buckets are being used by SpaceX and Stoke Space, they certainly aren't a new idea. Although the designs vary, the general idea is the same as what we've seen so many times before. Now, we had a big first this week as well, with Northrop Grumman's first Cygnus XL cargo mission setting off to the International Space Station. CRS NG-23 launched on top of yet another SpaceX Falcon 9 from Cape Canaveral's Space Launch Complex 40 on Sunday about an hour before sunset. Perfect long shadows here, which is great because this was another spectacular return to Launch Site Mission 2. After a stage separation, the boost back burn fired up to make its way all the way home to Landing Zone 2. This was booster 1094 on its 4th flight, and even though a young Falcon 9 to the fleet, it has launched big missions like the crewed Axiom 4 4 and NASA's Crew 11 mission. Fairing jettison there just before passing the 3-minute mark, and there was the brand new Cygnus XL. The debut of this larger cargo ship required careful preparation. With about 33% more space than the previous Cygnus, it can carry around 5 tons compared to about 3.5 for what they had previously named the enhanced version. Yes, it is a pretty big upgrade, and Northrop Grumman compared its size, saying that it is like 2 Apollo command modules stuck together. For this mission, the vehicle was named the SS William C. McCool, honouring the shuttle pilot from STS-107, which of course was the tragic Columbia disaster. Now, the ground cameras on this landing sequence were magnificent. Right at the end of the entry burn, there was the camera following this all the way down. I know we are all dreaming of the Starship doing this more and more in the future, but man, when I watch some of these daylight views from the ground, it still feels like science fiction to me. Look at how much the angle of the booster changes at the 6.5-minute mark. The speed readout returns, and with the angle of attack increased and the density of the atmosphere rapidly climbing, at this point it stops speeding up and starts quickly slowing from all that drag. At the 7-minute mark, you can see the G-forces involved there clear as day, and it almost looks like it's falling in slow motion thanks to the ground cameras zoomed right in there. Time to zoom out and kick off that landing burn for one of the most beautiful booster recovery shots to date. Check this out. Fantastic touchdown at landing zone 2 there. This was one of the last touchdowns at this site because SpaceX is preparing a new pad beside Slick 40 set to come online in early 2026. Landing zone 1 beside it has already been retired, and zone 2 probably only has a few landings left at this stage. So yeah, it's going to be strange to say goodbye to these pads. Nice shot here by Greg Scott snapping the start of that landing burn for this booster, by the way. Give him a follow on X there because we've got some exciting stuff to dive into next week. Now, under 9 minutes later, of course, there was the Cygnus XL deployed, which unfolded its Ultraflex solar arrays about an hour and a half later. Now, packed inside is almost 5 tons of supplies and science gear. Now, the spacecraft is supporting over 50 experiments, but what I'm most excited about is a critical zero boil-off study which will be crucial for long-term storage of cryogenic propellant. Everything we can learn from this is going to be really important, especially for long-term missions to the Moon and, of course, Mars. Now here is where things get interesting. Over the 2 days, it was supposed to coast along and arrive to be captured with the robotic arm on Wednesday, but no. Early Tuesday morning, Cygnus XL's main engine stopped firing earlier than planned during the 2 orbit-raising burns. All other systems were working fine, but it did mean that we would see a new arrival date and time. In the end, the issue didn't cause any huge problem, but interestingly, it seems to be related to a software glitch of some sort. Anyway, on Friday early morning, Cygnus had finally arrived. Sen had some neat video of this approaching from a distance, and speeding that up, just take a look at those gorgeous views of the Earth behind. It was birthed using the station's Canadarm2, and it is now attached to the Unity module. Now what you are looking at here is a view from Blue Origin's new free-flying camera that was deployed on the 35th flight for New Shepard on Thursday morning. Jeff Bezos dropped this video late Friday, and it is pretty awesome, isn't it? This bubble effect, I believe, is essentially a seam between the 2 separate 180-degree lenses. Interestingly, this was the final mission for the RSS H.G. Wells crew capsule on Flight 12, and moving forward, this will now be used for non-flight testing activity only. Along with that, some typical Starlink action. Starlink Group 1710 was off on Saturday morning from Vandenberg, and a whopping 28 flights for Booster 1071 here. Now, there was a little downtime with the Starlink network on Monday, which had been acknowledged on the website, with them stating that Starlink is currently experiencing a service outage and that our team is investigating. It was pretty quickly fixed though, because when I went to grab a shot of it, everything was back up and the message had been removed. 24 satellites on board this one, and minutes later, of course, I Still Love You was waiting downrange for the catch. Next up was Group 1061 across the country back at Slick 40. It was just before sunrise here as Booster 1092 made its way into the vacuum for its 7th time. Now, it is worth just pointing out that the on-screen mission interface has been updated again to be even sweeter starting with this mission. If you look at the progress line showing the events of the launch, it started off flat for the initial part of the ascent. Fast forward though, and you can see the curvature grow as the Falcon 9 gains altitude and speed. That's really neat. 28 on board this stack, and this time just read the instructions taking the catch. By the time the second stage cuts off, you can see the full curvature in the interface there. I love that. Finally for the week, Group 1712 early Thursday morning from Vandenberg Space Force again. 24 in the stack on board, and it was Of Course I Still Love You back out again. Landing number 10 for booster 1088, and that is another 4 lazy Falcon 9 missions for the week. Still making it look just a little too easy there, SpaceX. Now finally, look at this wonderful video shared by Vast this week. They are progressing quite well on their Haven 1 station, which, if everything goes right, should become the world's first commercial space station very soon. This is the real flight article with all of those final worlds now completed. This is where I think the domed window will be installed, and zooming out, here is a pretty neat view to give you a real idea of its size with the crew working hard on this awesome unit. It is only a small station, of course, with 45 cubic meters of habitable volume. This one will support a crew of 4 for 2 weeks at a time, but of course, eventually the idea is to have a bunch of these units all connected together. With this final article now being prepared for testing, if everything else falls in place correctly, they should be launching Haven 1 in May of next year with SpaceX's Falcon 9. So that is it for the week, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe so we get to keep making them. Massive thank you to all you incredible supporters on Patreon, YouTube memberships, and as ex-subscribers. Thanks for allowing us to do what we do. It has been a tough year with YouTube, so yeah, we are incredibly grateful to every one of you here helping us do this. Likewise, thanks everybody for watching all this way through. That helps more than I think anybody realizes. I will see you all in the next video.